5,000 tons. Let that number sink in for a moment. 5,000 tons. While the eyes of the world were glued to the political circus in Washington, and while the mainstream media was busy distracting you with the latest celebrity scandal, a silent signal was sent from the Kremlin late last night. It was a signal that has effectively changed the financial history of the world, and yet nobody is talking about it. Intelligence sources have confirmed a massive, coordinated movement of physical assets into the Russian Federation. For decades, we have watched Russia hoard gold. We watched them dump their U.S. treasuries. We knew they were preparing for something, but we were looking at the wrong metal. We are not talking about gold this time. We are talking about silver. Reports indicate that state-owned Russian entities, operating through a web of shell companies and off-market transactions, have executed a series of acquisitions totaling upwards of 5,000 tons of industrial and monetary silver. To put this into perspective, that is roughly 160 million ounces. That is nearly 20% of the entire annual global mining supply, vanished from the market in the blink of an eye. It's gone. If you go to the vaults in London or New York today, the inventory numbers on the screen might still look normal. But those are just pixels. The physical bars, they have left the building. They are currently sitting in the cargo holds of dark fleet vessels moving across the Indian Ocean, destined for high security vaults in Moscow. This wasn't a trade. This wasn't an investment. This was a raid. Vladimir Putin knows something that the West is ignoring. He knows that in a protracted conflict, silver is actually more valuable than oil. Oil keeps the tanks moving, but silver makes the missiles fly. By cornering the market on this specific metal, Russia isn't just protecting its wealth. It is preparing to choke the Western military-industrial complex into submission. The United States weaponized the dollar against Russia. We froze their reserves. We kicked them out of SWIFT. We thought we had them cornered. But this move to silver is Russia's answer. You cannot sanction a physical bar of silver sitting in a vault in the Urals. You cannot freeze it, you cannot track it, and you cannot delete it. Russia is moving its wealth from the digital ledger, where the US has power, to the physical world, where possession is the only law that matters. But how did they pull this off without triggering a massive price spike immediately? How do you move 5,000 tons of metal without the COMEX exploding? To understand this move, you have to understand a shadowy organization known as Gokran. Gokran is the state fund for precious metals and precious stones of the Russian Federation. For years, this institution has been the backbone of Russia's gold accumulation. They are the ones who built the fortress balance sheet that allowed Russia to survive unprecedented sanctions. But recently, their mandate quietly shifted. Insider leaks suggest that Gokran received a directive from the highest levels of the Kremlin: diversify and monopolize. They stopped buying just gold and started aggressively acquiring silver, but they didn't do it on the open market. They didn't walk into the London Bullion Market Association and place an order. If they had done that, the price of silver would be at $100 today. Instead, they used the shadow fleet. We know that Russia operates a massive fleet of oil tankers that turn off their transponders to avoid detection. These ghost ships have been selling oil to India, China, and Turkey. But here's the part the news isn't telling you. They're not just getting paid in fiat currency. Russia is returning to the oldest form of trade in human history: barter. They are trading energy for hard assets. They are offloading oil to nations like India, who is a massive silver importer, and instead of taking rupees or dollars, they are taking physical delivery of silver bars. This metal is then loaded onto Russian transport ships and brought back to the motherland. This bypasses the U.S. banking system entirely. No SWIFT messaging, no dollar clearing. Just oil out, silver in. It is the perfect crime against the dollar hegemony. The West keeps looking at the bank data to see where the money is flowing, but the trade is happening outside the banks. We are looking at the spreadsheets, while the physical inventory is being drained from right under our noses. This is why the spot price hasn't exploded yet. The transaction happened in the dark, but the vacuum it left behind is very real. The supply chain has been severed. And when the industrial users in the West wake up and realize the metal they need is sitting in a Russian bunker, panic will set in. Now, you might be asking, why silver? Why not just buy more gold? This is where the genius of the strategy becomes terrifying. Gold is money, yes, but silver is a strategic war material. In the 20th century, wars were fought over oil. In the 21st century, wars will be decided by technology, and you cannot build 21st century technology without silver. Silver is the most conductive metal on the periodic table. It is the Achilles heel of the NATO war machine. Every Tomahawk cruise missile contains roughly 50 kilos of silver. Every fighter jet, every Apache helicopter, every tank, and every guidance system relies on silver contacts and silver solder to function. Without silver, the electronics fail. Without silver, the missile doesn't launch. By taking 5,000 tons off the market, Russia has effectively fired a shot across the bow of the U.S. defense industry without launching a single kinetic weapon. Think about it. The U.S. has depleted its own strategic stockpiles. We sold off our silver reserves decades ago. We rely on imports. We rely on a global supply chain that assumes metal will always be available. Russia, on the other hand, is the world's fourth largest producer of silver. By combining their domestic production with this massive secret purchase, they are creating an artificial scarcity. If the conflict in Europe escalates, or if a new front opens up in the Pacific, where is Raytheon going to get the silver to build missiles? They will have to bid for it on the open market. But the market is empty. The supply is in Moscow. This is a strategy known as strategic denial. You don't just secure enough resources for yourself, you ensure your enemy has none. We are watching the de-industrialization of the Western military. We have the printing presses to create money, but we do not have the mines to create metal. Russia is betting on reality. They know that in a war economy, paper assets are worthless liabilities. The only things that matter are commodities: energy, food, and metal. Russia is self-sufficient in energy. They are self-sufficient in food. And now, with this 5,000-ton acquisition, they are securing the metal. They are preparing for a long-term economic siege where the global fiat system collapses, and the survivor is the one holding the hard assets. But there's another victim in this story, one that is closer to home for American investors. This move targets the very heart of Wall Street manipulation: the bullion banks. For decades, banks like JP Morgan and institutions involved in the COMEX have played a dangerous game. They sell paper silver. They sell contracts that represent silver, but for every 1 ounce of real physical silver in the vault, there are hundreds of paper claims circulating in the market. It is a game of musical chairs. As long as nobody asks for their physical metal, the music keeps playing, and the banks make billions by suppressing the price. Putin knows this. The Russian central bank analysts understand the fractional reserve nature of the Western gold and silver markets better than Western regulators do. By physically removing 5,000 tons of actual bars, Russia has removed the chairs. The COMEX and LBMA vaults were already critically low. They were bleeding inventory for consecutive months. This Russian purchase has likely wiped out whatever eligible inventory was left available for delivery. We are now operating in a deficit. The West is effectively naked short on silver. The irony is that Western bank manipulation actually helped Putin. By keeping the price of silver artificially low at $25 to $30 for years, the bullion banks allowed Russia to buy this strategic stockpile at a massive discount. If the price had been allowed to rise to its true value of $100 or $200, Russia wouldn't have been able to afford 5,000 tons. But because we suppressed the price to protect the dollar, we subsidized their accumulation. We paid for our own encirclement. The low price was a gift to our adversaries. Now, the trap is set. The bullion banks are short silver. They need that metal to cover their positions. But the metal is gone. It is in Gokran's possession. When the industrial demand hits next month, and the manufacturers come looking for delivery, the banks will be forced to admit they don't have it. This increases the likelihood of a force majeure event on the commodities market. The banks will be forced to default. They will settle in cash, admitting that the contract is worthless. Russia is intentionally driving the price up to bankrupt the Western financial institutions that rely on the paper game. This is financial warfare at its finest. They are attacking the solvency of the U.S. banking system by attacking the collateral it relies on. Every ounce they buy brings the COMEX one step closer to a complete mathematical failure. And when that failure happens, the price of silver won't just double, it will go vertical. We are looking at a repricing event that will wipe out the shorts and transfer trillions of dollars of wealth from those holding paper to those holding metal. But the military and the banks are only half the story. The third target, in Russia, AES crosshairs, is the very future of the Western economy, the green energy transition. For the last decade, the United States and Europe have bet their entire economic futures on net zero. We have passed laws banning combustion engines. We are spending trillions to cover our landscapes with solar panels and wind turbines. We have told our citizens that the future is electric. But there is a fatal flaw in this plan, a mathematical impossibility that the politicians refuse to discuss. You cannot have a green revolution without silver. It is the most reflective metal on Earth. It is essential for photovoltaic cells. A standard solar panel uses about 20 grams of silver. That doesn't sound like much until you realize we are trying to build billions of them. The electric vehicle sitting in your driveway, it uses up to 3 times more silver than a gas-powered car. Every connection, every battery management system, every computerized sensor relies on this metal. By taking 5,000 tons of silver off the market, Russia is effectively sabotaging the Green Deal. Think about the geopolitical irony here. Europe has sanctioned Russian oil and gas, claiming they will move to renewable energy to be independent of Putin. But to build the renewable energy infrastructure, they need silver. And who is now hoarding the silver? Putin. It is a trap within a trap. Russia and China are working in tandem here. China controls the processing and refining of the metal, and Russia is now aggressively securing the raw supply. They have cornered the market on the raw materials needed to build the future. The West has the blueprints, but the East has the bricks. German solar manufacturers and French electronics firms are about to face supply shocks that will make the 2022 energy crisis look like a minor inconvenience. We are looking at factory shutdowns. We are looking at the price of solar panels doubling or tripling. This drives inflation in Europe and the US even higher. It makes the cost of living unbearable. And a population struggling with inflation is a population that loses faith in its government. Russia is tightening the screws on the Western economy, using silver not just as money, but as a geopolitical weapon to cause social unrest in NATO nations. They are betting that if they make the cost of the green transition too high, the Western voters will revolt against their own leaders. This brings us to the ultimate goal. The 5,000-ton purchase isn't just about missiles, and it isn't just about solar panels. It is about the money in your pocket. We are witnessing the death of the fiat currency system and the birth of a new world order. For 50 years, the US dollar ruled the world because of the petrodollar deal. Saudi Arabia and OPEC sold oil exclusively in dollars, which meant every country on earth had to hold dollars to buy energy. That created an artificial demand for our currency, allowing the Federal Reserve to print trillions without immediate hyperinflation. That deal is dead. Russia is now accepting gold, silver, yuan, and rubles for its energy. Saudi Arabia is selling oil to China for yuan. The demand for the dollar is collapsing. So what replaces it? This is where the BRICS alliance comes in. Russia, China, India, Brazil, and their new partners are building a competitor to the US dollar. But they know that nobody trusts a new paper currency. To challenge the dollar, they need something better. They need a currency backed by reality. They are moving toward a trade settlement system backed by a basket of commodities: oil, gold, and silver. By acquiring 5,000 tons of silver, Russia is buying its seat at the head of this table. They are building a fortress balance sheet. While the US dollar is backed by $34 trillion in debt in the faith of politicians, the Russian ruble and the BRICS system are being backed by the periodic table. In a world of resource scarcity, the currency backed by resources wins. History tells us how this ends. The Roman Empire, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, they all fell when they debased their currency and lost control of their gold and silver. The United States is following the exact same path. We have debased the dollar to fund our wars and our welfare, and now we are losing the physical metal to our rivals. Russia-ES move is a signal to the global south. The era of easy American money is over. The era of hard money has returned. Every ton of silver that leaves a Western vault and enters a Russian vault is a vote of no confidence in the US dollar. It is a physical transfer of power from the debtor nations, the West, to the creditor nations, the East. The media will tell you Russia is weak. They will tell you their economy is collapsing. Ask yourself, if their economy is collapsing, how are they affording to buy 5,000 tons of silver? A bankrupt nation begs for loans. A strong nation buys assets. The flow of metal tells the truth that the headlines refuse to print. So, where does this leave you? If a nuclear-armed superpower is panic buying silver, what should you be doing? The movement of these 5,000 tons is a signal that the window is closing. There isn't much silver left to buy at these prices. Once the sovereign nations finish their accumulation, the door slams shut for the retail investor. We are in the final innings of the accumulation phase. The price is about to be repriced to reflect a world where silver is a strategic war asset, not just an industrial commodity. You need to understand the risk of the digital world. Part of Russia's hybrid warfare strategy involves cyber warfare against Western financial infrastructure. What happens if the banking grid goes down? What happens if a cyber attack freezes the SWIFT system? Your numbers on a screen, your stocks, your crypto, your bank balance, they vanish. They become inaccessible. Physical silver is the only asset that is immune to a cyber attack. It cannot be hacked. It cannot be deleted. By hoarding silver, Russia is preparing for a grid-down scenario. They are insuring themselves against the chaos they might create. You need to have that same insurance. Do not wait for the news to tell you to buy silver. By the time CNN reports on the Russian hoard, the price will be $100 an ounce. By the time the crowd realizes what has happened, the physical metal will be unobtainium, impossible to get. An economic iron curtain has descended. On one side, you have the G7 printing paper money and trading debt. On the other side, you have the BRICS, mining resources and hoarding gold and silver. The world is splitting in two. You need to decide which side of the trade you want to be on. Do you want to hold the debt of a declining empire or the assets of the rising powers? This isn't just a story about Russia. It is a story about your survival. The bear has made its move. 5,000 tons are gone. The West is empty. The East is full. The geopolitical checkmate is almost complete. While Washington plays politics, Moscow plays physics. And in the end, physics always wins. Get your position, get it out of the system, and prepare for what comes next.